Okay, welcome. Good to see you. Good to see you. Great to have you with us as this is week 5, isn't it? Week 5 of Christianity, Cults, and Religion. I'm John Hull. Robert Eakin will be joining us next week. He'll have most of the week because next week we're going to talk about Hinduism. Hinduism is primarily from what country? When you think of Hinduism, where do you find most of the followers of Hinduism? India, correct. However, it's amazing how much of the Hindu practices have begun creeping into Christianity. That's kind of how I want to end next week. Robert's going to introduce Hinduism, their basic beliefs, and so be with us next week. We'll also talk about yoga. I know some Christians that say a Christian should have nothing at all to do with yoga. I've heard some that think, the exercises are good and the stretches are good. Okay. But, so we'll talk about that more next week. How about that? Okay. Tonight, what I want us to do, we're using the Christianity, Cults, and Religion pamphlet again tonight. And I'm going to walk us through page number 10 and page number 9, and talk about a couple of religions that are really newer, much newer than Islam, much newer than Christianity. And these are religions that have come out, literally one of them in about the last 100 years, the other one in about the last 150 years. So we'll start out by talking a little bit about the Nation of Islam. Then we will be dealing with the Baha'i faith. Taking teachings from Islam and adapting it to their own. I will say neither one of them are anywhere close to each other. One would be relatively peaceful and tranquil in its following. If you were to go to one of their meetings, you would see no clergy, just people meditating or in their form of worship. That's the Baha'i faith. On the other hand, we would see in the Nation of Islam predominantly African American congregation. It's amazing how many of the men have bow ties, but every one of them dressed very smartly, very neatly. And the women, almost without fail, wearing some sort of a headdress and a matching long dress. The Nation of Islam is one that is predominantly here in the United States, with an interesting background, a very vocal but yet small following. Okay, but what I'd like to do is do a little bit of a recap last week of Islam to refresh us about, okay, what is it about the Islamic faith that makes them unique? And then from there we can sort of dovetail into the Nation of Islam and the Baha'i faith. I want to first play most of this video with a young man by the name of Abdul Samir and the reasons that he left Islam. Now, unfortunately, when people leave Islam, they generally are banned by their family. They're disowned. In this young man's case, he's now an atheist, professed atheist. And generally that's what happens when people leave one of these religions. So let's start out by listening to Abdullah and hear his testimony, and then we're going to go from there tonight.
Hello everyone. I wanted to share my story in some details. I was kind of hesitating to make a video, but you know what? I thought maybe I should do that because a few people thought maybe I'm not a real person. Some people thought there was some Jewish conspiracy going on, and all sorts of ideas out there. So I wanted to make a video to show that I'm a real person. I was born I was born into an Ismaili family. My dad is Ismaili, my mom was Sunni, and I was raised as an Ismaili. And around the age of maybe 18 or so in high school, I found Islam. Some of my friends invited me to read the Quran, and I started reading it. I started praying, what was called namaz or salah. And I got really excited. I found the Quran and I got really excited about it. I really liked it. And I said, hey, this is God's message to me. I didn't look into it too critically. I felt like, I looked into a little bit about the religions and stuff, and I felt it was just instinctive, and I felt like this is something, good, something I want to follow, God's message. And I started praying 5 times a day. And, eventually I took a deep dive into Islam. I started following it with all my heart and mind. Within like a few years after that, I started university, and then I got married, and then, what else? And then I started working. So when I was working, I tried my best to implement Islam. I would pray even at the office. I would find a stairwell. I would go and pray wherever I could, and I would get, if we had a prayer room, I would invite other people to come pray with me. And even in university, in the middle of exams, I would stop to pray. I would ask them, can I please get up? I need to say my prayers for Maghrib especially. And yeah, I was following it to the best of my ability, to be honest. I sincerely believed in Islam. I used to give out some DVDs. I made some DVDs of my own with some Islamic videos. I used to go from mosque to mosque, videotaping lectures and at conferences, and I wanted to promote it because I felt truly in my heart this was the true religion. I wanted people to go to Jannah. I wanted Allah to be pleased with me, and I wanted to follow the Prophet. And so that's what I did. I created a website, lightUponlight.com, and eventually another one, versebyversequran.com, to promote Islam because I believed in it. And there's still a bunch of videos on there if you go and see of that I videotaped myself, some of the lectures, and some of the other ones I got permission from others to put online. So that's what I was doing. And when I started working, I would avoid jobs that were involved with riba, anything to do with the bank. I wouldn't work for any banks whatsoever. I wouldn't work in the media industry like television or music. Personally, I would avoid I wouldn't listen to music. I wouldn't let my kids listen to music. I even put my kids in Islamic school, for as much as I could afford it, even though it was expensive here in Canada. But I mean, that's what you do, right? If you're a Muslim and you truly believe it in all your heart. As well, I used to rent. I didn't have a mortgage because I believed in it. Now, there came a point in my life where I started having a little bit of doubt here and there, small doubts. And eventually, I was at 2 years ago, I had some doubts. I was discussing with a friend online, and he mentioned that a lot of the stories in the Quran actually come from Jewish folktales. And I was very surprised about that, like Jewish folktales. I said, no, you mean it came from the Bible or the Hebrew Torah. And when I looked into it, I found out that actually a lot of the stories are from the Talmud, which is actually the Jewish commentary and the Jewish stories and basically the rabbis, commentary of the traditions. And so it doesn't really have a divine origin. And I also had a big problem with the story of Dhul Qarnayn, this tribe of how Dhul Qarnayn, he trapped this tribe of people, Yajuj and Majuj, Gog and Magog, behind a giant gate built of copper and iron. And I was wondering, where is this place? How come we can't find it? We have Google Earth and all that, and how come we can't find it? So that was another doubt. And I believe, left Islam for one day. But then I decided, you know what, I'm going to put my doubts aside. I'm Muslim, I want to go to Jannah, I want to believe in Allah. And I became Muslim for 1 more year. And then last year, so 1 year ago, is when I truly left Islam for good. I was in Ramadan, and I was at a pre-iftar halaqah, and the Shaykh was saying, Allah holds up the sky without any pillars. And this brought back all my doubts about, if the Quran is truly from God, the creator of the universe, the one that knows all things, why is he describing the world in a way that, was the 7th century understanding of the world? Like, the sky doesn't have, we know the sky doesn't have any pillars that you can see, but there's no need for pillars. Like, we're just a ball in space. Sky is just emptiness. It's just emptiness of space. So there's no need for any pillars, visible or invisible. And there's many things like that, like the orbit of the sun and the moon. Why Allah describes the orbit of the sun and the moon? Like, we know the orbit of the moon is around the earth. That makes sense. But the orbit of the sun, like, what orbit would that be? I looked into this and I found, well, there is an orbit. It's a 300 million year orbit of the sun around the Milky Way galaxy, which has nothing to do with humanity whatsoever because it's completely useless. But of course, at that time, the Muslims would have thought that this orbit is an orbit of the sun around the earth. And even Sahih Hadith, Prophet Muhammad, he asked his companions, do you know where the sun goes when at the time of Maghrib? And he said, Allah knows best and His Messenger knows best. And he said, it goes beneath the throne of Allah. Now we know the sun is actually still there, and it's actually the earth that's going around the sun. So this one and many other things, they didn't add up to me that why the creator of the universe is making these mistakes. Or describing it in a way that doesn't make any sense today, now based on the new information. And it made me wonder, is it truly Allah, the creator, or is it just coming from a man that lived in the 7th century, that believed these things, and was basically writing them as he went? And so, the stories in the Quran, like I said, Dhul Qarnayn, where is Gog and Magog, Yajuj and Majuj? There's supposed to be, millions and millions of them stuck behind this dam. We haven't found any such giant gate anywhere in the world. I mean, even some of I think it was Omar who went to look for it and they didn't find it. I mean, it doesn't make any sense, right? And so these things, my doubts began to grow and grow. And eventually I got to the point where I said, this can't be from God. I don't believe in this anymore. And because my doubt became more than my certainty. And when I started to look into each one of the claims that in the Quran, that the Quran is actually from God, like embryology and the mountains and all of these things, including the language, I found they just fell down flat. Like, for example, embryology, all you have to do is look into these things in detail to see how people misrepresent the Quran to be a scientific thing, when actually it's not. These stories were meant to be like, kind of to bring you to remember God and to say, look how amazing it is that, the embryo, how it glows. It wasn't meant to be, scientifically accurate. And when you look into it, you find it's actually, the idea is flawed. And the same thing with the stories in the Quran, like if they were true stories, why is it that we're finding trouble, verifying these facts? I'll make another video about Dhul Qarnayn in the future. It's a longer topic. But in summary, I just don't believe that there's any possibility that this actually came from a divine being, this book, the Quran. And when you look into it, you find many things that don't add up. And this is why I had to eventually leave Islam. Despite all the investment I put into it, emotional investment, and my personality, my friends, everything was Islam to me. So this was a huge loss, losing God. And some people want to know what I believe now. I personally don't believe there's any God, so I'm atheist. But if someone would ask, well, where did everything come from? I would say I'm still learning, and I don't think we have all the answers. But it is possible there is a force, outside of the universe. I don't know if you wouldn't call it necessarily God. You could call it God, but a force, a power, a being that made everything into what it is. But this
I just want to stop right there because I frequently hear that when people begin questioning what they believe, they usually come up with some pretty good questions. And when there just isn't any answers, they begin doubting. Now, hopefully, I don't know how many years, I can't remember how long ago he did this. Oh, 2016, right there. I pray that he's found the real true God. Okay. But what did you hear when in his testimony? Was there anything that you heard that you felt, this really is interesting, it ministers to me? What did you hear him say that stuck with you?
He says that he believes that their whole beginning came from Jewish
folklore. Yeah.
Interpretation. And they hate the Jews so much. Maybe that's why.
Well, it's hard to say. But Robert, do you have any clue? I mean, was Islam basically wasn't Muhammad? He just hated the Jews.
He certainly, if he didn't at first, he came to. There was a lot of one Bill Warner professor who wrote those books about the various literature of Islam, the Hadith, the Sirah, the Quran. He calculates that there's more anti-Semitism in those books than there is in Mein Kampf. and he's read both, and he keeps tally. He's like a math and stats professor, so he says there's a lot of anti-Semitism in there. I don't know if Muhammad was always that way, but I think somewhere around the Medina incident, he developed. I mean, certainly by that point, he developed some effective anti-Semitism.
Yeah. One thing I wanted everybody to see as I put together these series of videos here, and I'd be willing for anybody that's watching us on YouTube to send you the links. There's a whole series here of not only Abdullah's testimony. He did a video on the unusual beliefs of Islam. We don't have time tonight to really go through that. But there's also a video that I've put together in this series, and it's this one right here, Muslim versus Islamism. This gentleman talks briefly. In fact, why don't we listen to what he has to say about being a Muslim versus a follower of Islam. There is a difference. And we could skip the video after you look at that wonderful piece of appliance.
Hi, I'm your host Layla for WatchMojo.com. Joining us Tariq Fatah, author of Chasing a Mirage, to discuss the tragic illusion of an Islamic State. So, in your own words, what is a Muslim versus an Islamist?
A Muslim is someone who believes in the 5 commandments of the Prophet and the Quran, which are very simple, which is the belief in the unity of God, the fact that we are all required to pay a wealth tax at the end of every year to the poor. 1 month a year for 30 days we fast to show solidarity with the poor and the hungry. If wealth permits, once in a lifetime we go to Hajj, and on a daily basis pray to God whenever 5 times a day. But all these 5 requirements do not require political entity. That is a Muslim. An Islamist is someone who uses the identity of Islam and in fact then goes on to say we can't do this without having a political authority. And so the use of...
Did you hear that? An Islamist is one that does not, and this is interesting how he defines this, is one that uses the foundation of Islam, okay, but he looks for, if you will, a connection to the political scene in which they are living, okay? So many Muslims will follow Islam with wanting nothing at all to do with politics or a political entity, whereas those who are Islamists are those that want to take the Muslim faith and interact it to grab a hold of a political entity. And that's why we have the nations that we have. Because when you talk about the Middle East, except for the nation of Israel, we're talking about countries that are predominantly ruled, they're called Muslim or Islamic countries, right? Because the religion of Islam rules that part of the world. Same thing with Indonesia, large areas of that part of the Southeast Pacific. The former countries of the Soviet Union, especially Azerbaijan, is a Muslim-ruled area. Okay. Now, so we see that there have been these splinters of Islam. So what I'd like for us to do is I'd like for us to look at the nation of Islam, primarily African American, American-based splinter, if you will, of Islam. Now, of course, they believe in their own beliefs. We're going to look at page number 9 in your pamphlet. Notice that it says the founder was Wallace D. Fard in Detroit, 1930. but led by Elijah Muhammad, 1897 to 1975, since 1934. The current head is Louis Farrakhan. He's headquartered in Chicago, Illinois. Publicly, the Holy Quran is authoritative and the Bible is quoted often. But Message to the Black Man in America, Our Savior Has Arrived, and other books by Elijah Muhammad supply its distinctive views. Current teachings are in the Final Call newspaper and speeches by Minister Farrakhan. So who is Minister Farrakhan? I would encourage you, we don't have time tonight, but PBS did a documentary which looked at the religions of the African American community, dating back to slavery. And it's pretty interesting, but it laid the groundwork for what became, or has become in one splinter, the Nation of Islam. Here is Minister Farrakhan. I want you to listen to what he has to say here. Listen to what he says here. These, by the way, are newsreels, so there is some editing. A lot of B-roll. Look at how everybody is dressed. Look at the women. Notice the women.
Separation of black people from white people was one of the things that upset them. And I'm going to upset them a little more.
Again, look at how everybody's dressed.
Your love of America and black people has caused you to suffer every kind of indignity to get a little glimpse of freedom. My sister Nina Simone said, I wish that I knew what it means to be free. We don't know freedom.
That's the kind of okay.
Slaves to be allowed, isn't that nice? To be allowed to establish a separate state or territory of our own, either on this continent or elsewhere. Revealed to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad.
This is
For all these years, the American taxpayers' money has been given every year to Israel to maintain them on the land of Palestine. Don't you tell me that we have not earned by our sweat and our blood a land of our own and
what I hear when I'm listening to this is anger. I'm hearing and then intense fundraising. This is an organization that I think it's obvious that their leader is one that has intense anger towards the white man, towards the Jew. He is going off of, I understand the hurt and the pain, but that was in the past, correct? That was in the past. As recent as 3 years ago, Mr. Farrakhan, upon the arrival of a Hurricane Florence, which did millions of dollars of damage on the Carolina coast. I don't know if you remember this one, but it came right on, hit the outer banks of North Carolina, destroyed many cities and and communities out there on the Outer Banks went right through Washington, D.C. and dumped many, many inches of rain all over the mid-Atlantic states. Did a lot of damage and flooding in that part of the country in 2018. He said that was a judgment of God on America.
It represented the display as the vision unfolded to revive the spirit of the nation across the Capitol steps, folded up and secret. God brought the ginger man.
I'm not sure who he's referring
To the
to.
White House. Because, now listen carefully now, America has to pay for the sins that she has committed. The genocide of the native people, the transatlantic slave trade that brought us here, the lynchings, the brutality, the killing of us without any thought of justice coming to us. Do you think that God is pleased?
What do you think of that statement, just real quick? What do you think of that statement?
I think he doesn't know the history of mankind. He's not concerned about. There's always been slavery in this world.
There has been, yeah.
Always, he doesn't know the history of the world. Because if he knew the history of the world, he wouldn't speak about one culture, American culture, being so violent to black people. Because everywhere you go in the world, the guy that had the strong hand, whoever he was, whether it was the Greek, the Romans, or Carthage,
Yeah.
they had, it's just like it is in India, they had, what do you call it, caste system.
Caste system, yeah.
That's a form of slavery,
We've had some in some society. There's always been a caste system. There's always been a class.
Just about everywhere.
Yeah. And when you went and defeated a country, you took back their best looking people, and they became your slaves. And it didn't matter what their skin color
It
was.
doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. But to think that, well, let's keep listening to what he has to say here.
The system of white supremacy rules the political, educational, spiritual, cultural, economic, legal, whatever you want to say. White supremacy is ruling. So don't get it twisted.
Well, I don't think
Elijah
historically
Muhammad
he's
said,
totally correct there. There has been that.
"For judgment
But everywhere you have
coming against
slavery,
America."
you got the ruling class,
Rain.
or the non-ruling class. I mean, that's
Hail.
just,
Snow, earthquakes. These are the four major judgments. You're looking at one now. Her name is Florence.
I know some people.
Last year you looked at Harvey
What about in Africa?
and Maria.
When one tribe would go and catch the other tribe's people and sell them to the white man for trinkets, for beads and all kinds of stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And instead of they want to blame white people for all their problems.
Yeah. And these are white people from different cultures all over the world. So which one you?
Yeah. You're right. It just doesn't make sense.
So by him doing this, what is the
Well,
the plan at the end?
I
just
think
accepting.
if you look at the bottom of our pamphlet on page 9, under Well, let's start with salvation. People sin but are not sinful. Salvation is through submission to Allah and good works. Now that's very Islamic. That's a very Islamic belief. Older beliefs still include Fard as the Savior, in other words, the originator of the Nation of Islam. He's the Savior. Salvation comes from knowledge of self and realizing that the white race are devils who displace the black race. By the way, if you go up to the God, the third block down, here's what they believe, talking about God. Officially, there is one God, Allah, as described by the Quran, but Elijah Muhammad's teachings are also true. God is a black man. Now that's biblically, I can tell you that I could blow that out of the water real quick. Because what does our Bible say about God? God is
It's a spirit.
spirit. God is spirit. He's not a black man. Let's go back to death. There is no consciousness. Here's what they believe, the Nation of Islam believes. There is no consciousness or any spiritual existence after death. Heaven and hell are symbols. Statements about the resurrection refer to awakening mentally dead people by bringing them true teachings. So that's why they go about their diatribe. Is that they think that they're going to awaken the mentally dead through rallying them in something like what we just witnessed here. Other beliefs. Farrakhan's public messages coexist with earlier esoteric doctrines. Elijah Muhammad's older views, such as polytheism, that means more than one God. God as the black race. Master Fard as Allah incarnate. Whites as devil bred to cause harm. Are still distributed. But public preaching now focuses on Islamic themes. One eternal God, non-racial emphasis, frequent use of the Bible. So they seem to have tried to find a niche. Somewhere between Islam and somewhere between Christianity or the American church. I watched another video, and you could see it in that previous the documentary by PBS, or not PBS, yes, PBS, where they make it sound awful, where they've taken the setting of the American church and mixed in Islamic teaching with it, and they've come up with this set of beliefs. So it becomes, culturally speaking, it becomes a place for the disenfranchised, I suppose, disenfranchised African American person here in the United States.
Yeah. It's a trap.
And yeah, of course, and by the way, people don't see this, but the man who you just heard is an African American gentleman who's a regular attender here. It is a trap. It catches people that are looking for identity in the wrong place. And unfortunately, folks, and we'll see this when we talk about Mormonism. We'll see this next week when we talk about Hinduism. What makes them so attractive? People are searching spiritually for someplace to belong. And this is the kind of thing that they can fall into. Any questions or comments about the Nation of Islam before we move on? Baha'i faith. Rather than I try to pronounce the founder of the Baha'i faith, let me talk about a group that's polar opposite of what we've been talking about so far this evening. Polar opposite. Peace-loving people who are looking towards, if you will, eternal peace and love around the planet, but in a different way. Okay? So what I'm going to do is we're going to look at this video here, and this one is dealing with what is the Baha'i faith, what do they believe in, and you're going to see real quick a really, in just 3.5 minutes here, we're going to see a totally different type
The Baha'i faith is one of the most recent of Middle Eastern religions, arising in Persia, present-day Iran. During the mid-19th century, a time of religious fervor across many faiths, a merchant in Shiraz, Persia, declared that he had received a revelation from God. However, this man, known as the Bab, said that another, greater chosen one was soon to appear. That person was Baha'u'llah, loyal follower of the Bab and the nobleman by birth. As with the Bab before him, he was persecuted for his beliefs and thrown into a lightless dungeon. It was here that he received his own revelation from God. The Bab and Baha'u'llah taught that all the world's great faiths come from one divine source and have one purpose: to unite humanity. Baha'is, as followers of Baha'u'llah are known, hope for a completely unified world, the notions of racism, gender inequality, and social class being highly discouraged. For a Baha'i, marriage can only be between one man and one woman. Same-sex or multiple partners is not considered acceptable, though these decisions are left up to the individual. There are 7 Baha'i places of worship around the globe. The World Center in Israel is the most sacred of these sites. Amongst its magnificent buildings are the Shrine of the Bab and the Shrine of Baha'u'llah, where the remains of both holy men are interred. There are no clergy or rituals within the Baha'i faith, worship taking place primarily in the home. Baha'is embrace all religions. Enlightened figures such as Jesus, Buddha, and Zoroaster are revered as manifestations of God, of which Baha'u'llah was the most recent. Baha'u'llah declared that he was not the last of these great teachers, and that others would appear. Baha'is do not expect to see another of these divine manifestations for at least another 1,000 years.
So it tells you a little bit about the general belief, the beliefs of the Baha'i. Let's take a minute here and let's just go through what our pamphlet has for us, just to kind of get a background. Sayyid Muhammad the Bab.
Something on your mind. Chew on it.
The Bab, who lived between 1819 and 1850, and Mizra Ali, who was Baha'u'llah, who lived 1817 through 1892, founded the Baha'i faith in 1844 in Iran. But notice that the international headquarters are in Haifa, Israel. The writings of Baha'u'llah and the Bab include Most Holy Book and the Book of Certitude. The Bible, interpreted spiritually, is conformed, though, to, they do use some of the Bible, but again, used to conform to their theology. According to the Baha'i faith, God is an unknowable divine being who has revealed himself through 9 manifestations. Now listen to all their prophets, okay? Prophets of the Baha'i faith include Adam and Moses. Well, that's Judaism. Buddha, that's something totally different. Jesus, of course. Muhammad, we're going back to Islam there, and the Baha'u'llah. They don't believe in the Trinity. Jesus is one of the many manifestations of God. Each manifestation supersedes the previous, giving new teachings about God. Jesus, who superseded Moses, was superseded by Muhammad, and most recently by the greatest, Baha'u'llah, whose name means glory of Allah. Jesus is not God and did not rise from the dead, and he is not the only way to God. that Jesus' spirit returned to earth in Baha'u'llah, who is superior to Jesus. So again, here we go. We have another religion where a very strong, charismatic individual comes up with something very super spiritual and gets a following. We're going to see that. We saw this here with the Nation of Islam. We saw that when we talked about Jehovah's Witnesses. We saw that when we talked about Seventh-day Adventists, our second week. And we're going to see it in a couple of weeks when we talk about Mormonism. Same type of charismatic person who has something totally different and people follow him. According to the Baha'i Faith, the Holy Spirit is divine energy from God that empowers every manifestation. Spirit of truth, the word Spirit of truth refers to Baha'u'llah. Faith in the manifestation of God is how people are saved through the Baha'i Faith, knowing and living by Baha'u'llah's principles and his teachings. According to the Baha'i Faith, when they talk about death, personal immorality is possible, based though on good works, with rewards for the faithful. Heaven and hell are nothing but allegories for nearness and remoteness from God, but not actual places. And again, we as Christians know that there is a real heaven and a real hell. So anytime you talk to a person about their faith and they don't believe in heaven or hell or neither one of them, you know right away we've got differences. Okay? And then finally, some of their other belief in the Baha'i Faith. Baha'i originated as an Islamic sect and is severely persecuted in Iran. Baha'i teaches that all religions have the same source, principles, and aims. I know somebody I consider a friend who believes that same thing, that all religions point to the same direction in one way or another. Everybody has their own truth. The Baha'i stress on oneness and world unity. We saw that in our video. And regular local gatherings called feast. Administrative meetings are called spiritual assemblies. And their universal house of justice is located, we saw it in a photo of a beautiful building in Haifa, Israel. And there is their eventual governing body. One thing I wondered if anybody saw it, and because I'm going to edit this video, I'm going to try to bring it up right now, which is there is a quick little glimpse of the what looks to be like a dome area of their center there in Israel. I don't know if you saw it, but there was the cross, and right below it was a swastika.
Oh, I saw it.
Did you see the swastika as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed that. I was going, wow, that's weird. That's weird. Because if I remember right, I believe the swastika was a demonic symbol, if I remember right. I need to study this out a little bit more. But I noticed that they had quite a number of symbols in their dome there at their international headquarters. Baha'i faith, again, is one of these religions that just has grown some legs in the last 100 years or so. Who doesn't want, world peace? Who doesn't want spiritual oneness or be at peace with each other? And I mean, the basic. I mean, everybody believes that way in one way or another. But for them, it's something that tends to swerve you and take you away from the truth, which is the truth of Jesus Christ. So what I'm going to do now is kind of conclude. I have the next video is an interview done on a program called 100 Huntley Street, which is from Canada. It's a Christian program that's been done for years and years up in Canada. And this woman talks about her testimony of being a Christian, the Christian church not fulfilling her needs, and as a young adult, she turned to the Baha'i faith. And there was reasons for that. And listen to those. And then she realized there's nothing real here either, and how she through the Alpha course that we're, by the way, teaching in the next room over here at our church, through the Alpha course,
What is it?
what's that?
The Alpha course.
Alpha course is just a very, it was originally written by an Anglican in England, okay? And we've been teaching it now, this is our second session. It's what is the basics of Christianity. And so through an Alpha course, she turned back to God, okay? So let's watch this and listen to her testimony.
Well, it's been said that everyone has a story, and the stories of people finding faith are the best in my opinion, because the infinite creativity God uses in drawing us to himself. My guest today has a story that took her through many twists and turns on her journey to God. You might just recognize parts of your story in some of them. Emily, thanks so much for coming on.
I'm delighted to be here.
You know, you started out like a lot of people do. You went to youth group, you had read the Bible when you were young, but it didn't really take. What was the challenge? Like, why didn't it take? Or
Well, I think the reason that it didn't take was I was faking my way through. And I actually was not a Christian, and I liked all these really cool Christian kids. I know that sounds strange, doesn't it? I was friends with a lot of Christian kids. They were fun, they were safe, and I wanted to be able to hang out with them and trick their parents into thinking I was a nice person. So I did youth group stuff with them. And yeah, I learned a little bit of Bible that way, heard the gospel, but it just bounced right off.
I think that's normal. I don't think that's unusual. I think a lot of people would say they shared that experience, you know, that they kind of grew up culturally in Christianity, not necessarily owning it.
That's right.
So you actually went on kind of a spiritual search, and you ended up with the Baha'i faith. So what was it about Baha'i that really interested you?
Well, I think one of the things that I really loved about it was the idea of universal world peace. Like that was one of the tenets of the faith, was that eventually everyone would become Baha'i and that it would be a world order. It comes out of Islam. It's an offshoot of Islam. And so the idea of having one language, equality of the sexes, no economic issues like one world currency, and one centralized government that would enforce this peace. That because I was kind of a perfectionist, I just thought that this was just a beautiful, wonderful thing. And so there's a sort of a mysticism about it as well. And I found that really fascinating, that the history of the Baha'i faith is really fascinating. And so all those things together brought me to it. And I think too, I had just gone to college at the same time, and so it was kind of my way of like, I'm gonna do my own thing, you know, and that's how I got into it.
And you said, you know, you were a perfectionist growing up. You were an extremely bright child. You tried to make everything perfect. I remember you say that you went back to your teachers and you had give them a hard time. You didn't get like perfect on something.
Well, I was one of the kids who, you know, they do the test in grade 3 and then they get put into the program. And when I noticed that people really liked that, people really thought I was really special, and so I thought, well, I got to keep this up. This is, and that's a very common thing for kids who are slated into gifted kid activities.
The pressure.
That's right, and I think most of the pressure was internal, though. I felt that it was external. I felt that other people were trying to make me be this perfect person, but looking back on it now as a 34-year-old, that was really all internal. I was just doing it to myself.
Yeah, because you had a kind of perfectionist side, and so when you entered the Baha'i faith, you had to do that right too.
I had to do it right.
You were failing.
I was. You know, there are obligatory prayers to say every day, and I would miss them. And I'd go, oh, okay, well, I'll try better tomorrow. And I would miss that too. And there are ceremonial washings to do, but nobody within the community in my town in London, Ontario was really able to teach me anything about that. And so I felt, okay, that's another thing that I'm failing at too. And I also started dating a boy at that same time.
Who was a hostile agnostic.
Yeah, he was. So, what is a hostile?
But you're mad at him, right? Is that pretty much it?
I think that's sort of it. Yeah, if there is, when I get to heaven, I got some stuff to say. Yeah, like that's gonna work out. But yeah, he was a really great guy, really nice guy. Ended up, you know, getting into a long-term relationship with him, and I tried to make those two worlds meet. He was pretty sure that everything I believed was mystic baloney, And so the thing that I tried to do was, well, if I just take him to enough events, he'll see that, you know, this is really great, and you know, we'll both be behinds together, and this is awesome. And every time I took him to something, he was like, no, that's weird. That's weird.
It wasn't working.
Yeah, it wasn't, he was not interested in doing that. And I tried to have two separate lives at the same time. I wanted to do, try to do my prayers and try to be holy and chaste, but I had this college boyfriend who was not interested in being holy and chaste whatsoever. And so you can see how these two worlds might collide a little bit.
Yeah, and so as time went on, you were living with him, you kind of really were dragging in your Baha'i faith.
I completely gave it up and said, you know what, I quit. I'm not good enough at this, so I'm just not going to do it at all.
That sounds like a perfectionist, right? If I can't do it well,
if I can't do it well, I won't do it at all. That's right.
So you had a friend that became a Christian around that time, and he invited you to Alpha. And you guys, neither of you had interest in Christianity, but you said yes. So why did you do that?
It was a few years later. It was after we were done college, after we'd been working for a while, and we had a friend of ours who was really it shocked us. He had been, you know, one of these guys who liked to put on a shiny shirt and go to the club. And so we were just, well, that's bizarre. You know, we thought maybe he'd joined some sort of bizarre group. And he invited us to Alpha, and he had told us later that he really felt a prompting to invite who later became my husband, my boyfriend at the time. And my boyfriend said to me, you want to go to this like Christian discussion group thing that our friend wants us to go to? And I said, yeah, okay, that sounds great. And we show up at Alpha, and I thought this was like a one-time thing, half an hour, we clap, and he said, welcome to the 10-week Alpha course. And I look at him and I'm like, and he's like, and so we decided to stay for all 10 weeks, partially because we didn't want to hurt our friends' feelings. And we learned, and I relearned sort of the doctrines, the concept of Jesus and what he's done, and the idea that he's paid for the sins of mankind. And we went, you know what, that's really nice. Thank you for inviting us. You know, we're not really interested, but thanks so much.
And now your husband, the hostile, now this boyfriend who became your husband,
Yeah.
the hostile agnostic, he decides he wants to start reading the Bible so that if he's going to make fun of Christians, he knows what he's talking about.
That's right, that's right. Because the more we got to talk with our friend, I think he realized, I need to know more about this. So at the time, we had a Bible store right down the street from our house. It was a Christian bookstore. And so he walked down, got himself a Bible, and as you said before, I had learned a little bit about the Bible when I was younger. So I thought, well, okay, I'll do that too. And after we'd been reading it for a little while, some strange things started to happen.
Okay, strange things. And this is the part that some people have given you a hard time about, but...
Yeah, a lot of people think that I'm just either out of my mind or I'm just wrong. and that can be really hard and frustrating. The things that started happening were things that could be seen as coincidental, but we really felt were spiritual attacks.
Like dark presences.
Really, yeah. We would wake up in the evening and really feel like there was somebody else in the house when there wasn't, and be afraid to go to the back of the house, which is, since there was a washroom there, it was really inconvenient because we wouldn't want to leave our bedroom.
And Aaron waking up with scratches on his back.
He would wake up with scratches on his back, which I did not put there, bloody scratches, and he would be fighting in his sleep all the time. He'd be swinging his arms around and as if he was trying to fend somebody off. I was seeing things that weren't there. There was a time in which I thought there was a moth attacking my face, and he was telling me, no, there's nothing there.
So we're running out of time, but it came to a head one night where literally in the middle of the night he wakes up. What happens? Or you wake up. And
I wake up and I see him half off the bed as if someone is pulling him up by his shoulder. It was not a natural sleeping position. He was partially up off the bed. And I was terrified, and I said, go away. And I didn't know who I was talking to, and he laid back down again, and he woke up, and he said, what's wrong, what's happening? And I explained to him, this is what I saw, and he had felt himself fall down on the bed. This is what he told me afterwards. And so we tried to get back to sleep. He doesn't remember turning to me, but he did, and it was not his face. It was really, really scary. It did not look like his face at all. It freaked me out. I started crying, and I had this choice at that moment. I can either end up in a psychiatric institution because I'm seeing things, I'm feeling presences, and what is wrong with me? But then there was Jesus, and I remembered everything I learned. And where else am I going to go at that point? I asked God to save me. I didn't have to ask anybody what to repent of. I knew that as a Baha'i, I had been worshiping a false god. I knew that as a perfectionist, I'd been worshiping self. And immediately, that all stopped. Now, there were 12 seconds in which I had to wait for my boyfriend to see what he was going to do. And he also asked God to save him. And, yeah.
So when you say everything stopped,
I mean, that presence,
the fear went away, the evil presence,
that thickness in the air lifted. And at that point, we could tell it was gone. And we looked at each other and went, so we're Christians now. What do we do?
This is unexpected.
Yeah, this is unexpected. We did not.
So tell me what that was like, because a lot of people, maybe they come from a similar background to you, very skeptical, not necessarily wanting to buy into Christianity, and now you just, in the middle of this terror, made this decision. How did you feel? What changed in you besides the dark presence going? Did anything else change?
I would say that the sanctification process was slow. But we fortunately had been going to, I had started going to our friend's church just to kind of stick our toes in the water. And so we were able to meet with a pastor who believed us and who understood and kind of helped us to get into a healthier position. We eventually realized that we shouldn't be sleeping together, that might not be a good idea. And he was able to lead us through, and eventually we got married. And we lived happily ever after.
Oh yeah, everything was
not perfect.
Not,
no, of course not.
Into perfectionism.
Oh, you know what? Becoming a mother has made that go out the window. There's no such thing as a perfect mother, and there's no such thing as perfect children, and there's no such thing as a perfect life. And I've had to get over that. And I think a lot of people do end their stories with and we live happily ever after. We still do have struggles that we go through in life. I did lose a child to miscarriage, and I have in the past few years developed epilepsy. Mm-hmm. And so those have been some struggles that we've dealt with. But in both of those particular instances, and obviously there are other things that happen in people's lives too, God was with us during the miscarriage. And I know that because the baby died at week 8, but we didn't find out until week 13. And by then we'd told everybody, and I had been washing the dishes and had started to feel, anyone who's had a miscarriage knows that something is wrong. And I prayed, is this happening? Why is this happening now? And I really felt the impression of, I'm not going to let you do this alone. This is not something that you're going to do by yourself. Yeah, and still with being diagnosed with epilepsy, I mean, I was shocked, obviously, because people don't know very much about epilepsy, and I certainly never had to care about it because it wasn't part of my life. But it's taught me to be humble, and in terms of my body is not my own. It belongs to Christ.
We think we're in control of our lives until something happens to show us that we're not, and that's when God comes in.
Especially the brain, right? And so life is not perfect, but we have Jesus.
Beautiful,
Yeah, that's right.
beautiful statement. Beautiful statement. Beautiful statement. Her testimony got a little weird there with these spiritual experiences. Let me just say that many people who have caught themselves up into other religions and even into cults that sound like Christianity have themselves experienced those kind of things. And that's because they have been worshiping false gods. Yeah. They've been stepping outside of the grace of Almighty God. And they've been out thinking that they are worshiping God, when in truth it's a false god. In fact, it may even be a demonic god that they're worshiping, disguised as something Christian. And that's her testimony, though it sounds a little bit out of a science fiction movie, I have heard those kind of testimonies over and over again, especially people involved in false religions.